Hey there, and welcome to Marriage Talks, a real, authentic, and relatable podcast about how to thrive in your marriage. I'm Elizabeth Ann.
And I'm Michael.
And on today's episode, we are going to be tackling the authenticity buzzword, if you will.
We're unofficially calling it in our files the authenticity episode.
Yes.
So that's the overarching theme here.
Yes. And I do want to say, before we dive into today's topic, today's episode is brought to you by the Marriage Talks Patreon. If you decide to become a member of our community, you gain access to exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. And it also helps our mission here at Marriage Talks, which is to help married couples thrive.
Yeah, so y'all check it out. Can't wait to hear back from you and
connect with you.
Yeah, and see what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're always looking for feedback. If you are checking out the Patreon and you have any ideas for exclusive content that you want to see or hear, just email us or contact us on DMs and stuff.
And all the links for contact and everything, it's in the show notes. So
yeah,
all of that will be there. Let's talk about why we're talking about authenticity, because I think some people might be wondering, okay, this is kind of a weird topic.
Yeah, it seems a little bit out of the blue, but if you're in kind of the circles we spend time in online, like we're running a marriage and communication podcast. And so we follow a lot of accounts that are similar. One of the ones you cannot ignore is Rachel Hollis. we're not here to like bash anything going on.
Or to place judgment or assume anything.
Yeah, we don't know Dave and Rachel Hollis, but they have been in the news recently. To back up a little bit, if you've never heard of them, I want to kind of tell you who they are so that you know what we're talking about. But Rachel is an author and a speaker and like motivational speaker and
like
kind of a health coach.
I think people would label her as like a motivational guru.
Yeah, so she worked for what's his name? Tony Robbins?
I don't think she never worked for him to my
Amy
knowledge.
Porterfield.
She never worked for him, but she very much so looks up to him.
Yeah, so she kind of models herself after Tony Robbins, where big conferences, everybody dancing and all that stuff. And she's married to a guy named Dave, and they have a bunch of kids. And her online presence is really positivity. You can do everything. They have a marriage podcast that had a ton of listeners from what I understand. They had marriage conferences of how to thrive in your marriage. Sounds familiar. But, it's one of those, they're just this huge presence in this space of relationships.
Well, one of their main things was being authentic to their audience. Like that was a very, very big push for them.
Yeah, and that's definitely important for tonight's episode. The reason in the news lately is because last week, about a week ago, they announced that they were splitting.
After 18 years of marriage, which just, I mean, no matter how long the timeline is, it still breaks my heart. But it's a lot of just work and time and sharing your life with somebody.
Yeah, they have 4 kids too, and that's always a huge challenge. When she announced it on her account, she has like 2 million followers. He announced it on his too. I went through and was reading, and the reading of the comments really sparked the idea for this episode. It was like, we need to make sure we discuss this, because the big overarching thing that we were seeing was you talk about being authentic, and then part of the description, the caption that she put was, we've been having trouble for like 3 years, heavily, and we decided to be partners apart, like run the business, run the family, raise the kids as partners, but not married. And I think that that's kind of what struck everybody, was the whole 3-year part. It was like, you're running a marriage conference and you're running a marriage podcast and all this stuff, and you've been almost ready to divorce for like 3 years.
Well, and
you never shared it.
For those who don't know who they are and don't know their timeline, around 3 years ago is when Dave left his job with Disney and they relocated. And they built the Hollis Company. And so they started a fresh new chapter, which is really cool that they had the opportunity to do that. But I think a lot of their audience felt really sad that they were saying, here's how to have a great life and here's how to do this and that. And it's all within you, which if you've listened to our podcast, you know that we're believers. And so let me just tell you, I can't do anything on my own. It is the saving grace of Jesus, the work that was done on the cross, that I can do anything throughout the day. So I don't believe for one second that the power is within me, but I just think that their audience was so sad. The people that really trusted them, that that they felt like they were led astray because they were saying, here's the key to having a good life or the key to having a good marriage, and they just weren't being forthright. That's why we are talking about being authentic in today's episode. And like I said before, it really, when I read that, I was really saddened because Michael and I have walked through some really hard seasons, and I know that we will walk through more because it's life and we're sinners. I just really believe that I really wanted them to keep going, keep the marriage together, because I don't believe that separating or being divorced, unless there is an abuse, like unless there is a physical abuse, physical harm, that's different. I don't know what's going on in their situation, but to continue to do the work. The best thing for their kids is to continue to do the work. Again, there are some situations where it is much, much safer to be separated and to end that relationship.
Right. Yeah.
So just don't hear what I'm not saying. But I really, really pray for them and that they would find reconciliation with each other. And I pray for those kids. That's really hard.
They're young too.
Really
I think their oldest is
hard.
like 10.
I think he's 13, but either way, it's still so young.
Yeah, divorce is tough for any child.
That's really young. So it broke our heart when we read that and just the community that they had built. And so we're talking about being authentic with you, our listener, like the person that shows up every week, because our desire is to be authentic. Like, we are real, authentic, and relatable podcasts about how to thrive in your marriage. We're sharing the dirty stuff.
Yeah, and that's been our tagline since the first episode. So we want that to be the thread that goes through everything.
So we're talking about being authentic because we want to be authentic with you.
Yeah.
We want you to hear our hearts for marriage, our hearts for the difficult seasons, our hearts for the good seasons, our hearts for the victories, our hearts for the hurts. There's going to be a lot of it. Marriage is really hard and marriage is sanctifying. Holy cow. If you walk into marriage saying, oh, he completes me and marriage is going to make me happy. Michael does not complete me.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. Michael does not complete me, and he does not make me happy 100% of the time. I don't make him happy 100% of the time. I don't complete him. The only thing that completes us and makes us happy is Christ. That's it. Bottom line. Us and sharing our hearts is sharing the behind the scenes, sharing that so that our goal is to help you grow.
Yeah, and definitely talking about authenticity with you guys, our listeners. That's a big deal. And one other thing we wanted to touch on during this episode is a lot of those fans, 2 million people or whatever, were really blindsided by the fact, like, wait a second, this was actually falling apart behind the scenes for a long time. We had no clue. And they felt kind of troubled by that.
They felt lied to.
And even don't even worry about like a huge brand and all this stuff, a big company. From the main unit that we talk about every week, the husband and wife unit, got to make sure that there's that's hard to say, authenticity there as well. It's a big thing we're going to touch on during this episode also. You've signed up for this partnership, and if you are just, hey, I'm good, you know what, I'm strong, work's going great, raising kids is going great, marriage is great, but in the inside you're in turmoil, you're not doing yourself any favors, you're not doing your wife any favors, your kids are going to feel that.
Absolutely.
Everybody's going to feel that eventually because it all bubbles up.
Yeah.
So we can't emphasize enough how important it is to just be authentic, and with the people that you love and trust them well by talking to them about your current issues.
Right. And so how we plan to be authentic with you as somebody who gives of their time to listen to us week in and week out, which we are incredibly thankful for. Holy cow. We're so thankful for you. So if you listen, please reach out. We want to know and we want to celebrate you, and thank you for doing the work. Marriage is hard, and it requires work and sacrifice. And so we are super, super thankful and super excited that you are wanting to do the work. So reach out because we want to celebrate.
And before we move on, we've had this week a couple of different people reach out, and it's just been like, oh man, great comments on Instagram. Like, was it a DM or a comment? I don't know, but
there was a comment.
There was a comment on our Instagram that was just like, it started my day off perfectly. I was like, oh man, people are finding our show. They're enjoying it and just like happy about it. So it's cool because we do this week to week. We have a great time doing it. We love setting it up and talking about stuff together. But to hear that it's, oh, you're crying.
I am. I was
She's
just
crying.
going to say, if I think about it too much, I start crying because it really touches my heart that in a culture where divorce is used very quickly. This is not to judge all people who get divorced, so please don't hear what I'm not saying, but where I think sometimes knee-jerk reactions is to, well, it's not working out, so let's just get a divorce, when really examining the heart and doing the work and walking through those valleys and those peaks, because marriage is going to have that. It's like any other relationship. Not every relationship will be high all the time. It just won't. It's not realistic.
And going back to that, like, authenticity, if you do have somebody, if it's your spouse or somebody who's a friend who's always on a high, always like, I'm good, I'm never having a bad day, like, you need to actually like look into that and make sure that they're okay, because it just doesn't work that way.
Right. If you never fight,
yeah. In fact,
it's not good.
I remember in high school and college having some friends who had like a 6-month or year-long relationship, and they say, yeah, we never fight. I'm thinking like, oh boy, something's gonna blow up, because there's disagreement internally, I guarantee it, and that person or both aren't bringing it up at all, and this is going to be an absolute nuclear bomb at some point.
Yeah, so I just feel like I just get so excited when I hear people kind of reach out and say, I've been listening to the show, I love it, it's so good, thank you for doing this. It really, really touches my heart, because it's somebody who recognizes that marriage is going to be hard at some point, and they want to do the work. And it's good work. It's good work. And at times it's gonna really suck. It really really will. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many times that we've argued and cried and just been at odds with each other. Not even kidding. We argued yesterday and we argued today right before recording this.
Yeah.
And we had to say, like, look, my pride was getting in the way of clearly communicating with you, or I'm experiencing a lot of stress about something that's coming up, and it's really, really preventing me from talking to you with love and grace. It really, really is. And it's so hard it is so hard, guys, to apologize. It's really hard for me. It's really, really hard. But every time that I do, Michael is incredibly gracious, and he's like, of course I forgive you.
Wait, but that's after I say, ha ha, told you so.
That is not what happens.
No. In fact, told you so is like basically outlawed from this house, because I did that of some form like under 2 weeks ago, and it was met with so much like, you did not just say that.
No. There is no I told you so, or I predicted that. That is full of pride and ego, and that is another episode for another day.
Yeah.
So don't do that.
Well, it's actually funny because we wrote this episode scripted, outline yesterday. And in there I put, let's talk about the kind of argument we had today. And then we had a dead battery, couldn't shoot, couldn't record. So we kicked it to today. We had another totally separate thing. So it still applies.
It still applies.
So, it's just, we enjoy the heck out of each other, but we're two people. Like, we bicker here and there, but the cool thing is, I can honestly say the bickering's always pretty short term. The apologies are there.
Heartfelt and correct. We have an episode about apologies, by the way.
The anatomy.
We'll link it in the show notes. The anatomy of an apology.
Yeah, it's early on. One of our first golden ones.
Yes.
They're all golden. What am I saying? Let's talk about how we plan to be, like specifically how we plan to be authentic with you guys, our listeners. Yes. Hit us with the first one.
So we are going to share information that we know will be helpful and beneficial to those listening. So arguments that we had, like lessons that we've learned from the past, things that we have done that definitely didn't work. And when I say definitely didn't work, like across the board, they're not going to work. Like if you value your pride over caring for your spouse, I don't care what relationship you're in, it's not good. It will always bring poor results. So feeding into your pride and ego above valuing your spouse, just across the board, that's bad. So we are going to share real life instances where that happened for us that we feel like other listeners will benefit from and say, oh, I can see, because they explained it, how that's a bad thing. Instead of just saying, don't feed into your pride. Well, what does that actually look like when you're apologizing, or when you're going through an argument, or, when you're trying to decide the paint color in your house? Like, down to the most simplest of examples, we are going to try our best to give you examples of how it worked in our life, or didn't work within our marriage. And we're going to share the things that did work. So, we learned, okay, don't do X, Y, and Z because it was really bad. And then when we course corrected, here's what we did to course correct. We would suggest trying this in your marriage because we think it would be very beneficial. So we're going to give real examples of what we walked through. We want to speak from our experience. And if we don't have that experience, we are going to seek out another couple that we admire who have experience with that. Because we never want to speak from a place where we don't have experience, because we feel like we would be feeding you a line and just saying, oh, we heard this worked, you should try it. It's just, we would never recommend something to you that we don't fully believe in and fully, have a heart behind.
I feel like if we tried to do something like, as we write as we write the outline for episodes, it's, you can tell if it's working or not. And there's been a couple that we've just written a few and then abandoned because it's like, I'm not feeling this. I don't feel like we're experts of any kind on this,
Or that maybe we're not out of the weeds of yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like some things will always reoccur. Fighting will always reoccur within your marriage, but it could be something very specific that this wound is still really fresh, and I don't know that we can have a clear mind and clear heart about how to best communicate that. So that will be a subject that we're like, we that's something that we still need to heal from. So we need to put that to the side and work on that individually, like as a couple behind the scenes, not on camera or recording a podcast about it, because I don't feel like that's fair.
No, and that kind of brings up a good point where we strive for authenticity with our listeners, but as a living, breathing, dynamic married couple, kind of living our lives a little publicly here on the podcast and YouTube, there will be some stuff that we are not going to share.
Absolutely.
Just, there's a limit to some stuff, like active things we're working through, or stuff that's really personal, past a certain point. We're going to definitely keep that to ourselves. It may come up when it's like a healing situation.
Yeah. But
there's some limits to what should be put online. And this if you've ever watched like the Kardashians. Like, this is too much.
Well, and
it's not healthy.
I would say one example, because you're thinking like, well, what would you keep like just between the two of you? Like Michael said, like an open wound or an open hurt or something that we're actively working through. We don't have a clear head to work through that yet. But another example could be like things that are extremely sexual, like personal bedroom stuff. We're just not going to talk about that. We are going to try and give you information to help thrive in that area. We are not going to give you specifics and like real life examples of what happens between the two of us, because first of all, it's just not appropriate. And there are some things that are just sacred between a married couple that need to stay that way. And we will protect that.
Yeah. And thirdly, your marriage is very personal too. Like, even if we were to give bedroom tips to a certain degree, it's like, everybody's got their thing and you need to find out what your own chemistry is. But it's kind of another time, another discussion for another time. But that just came to me.
That will be a future episode of how to best cultivate the success in that area.
Yeah.
But we won't give like personal information between the two of us, because that is a sacred thing. That is a sacred connection. And that is something that we will hold fast to. And sorry, not sorry. We're just not going to talk about it.
Lock the box.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a huge part of any marriage. So we've done a couple of episodes on intimacy, emotional, physical. It's a big part of stuff. But yeah, the nitty gritty details, there are other podcasts if you want that stuff.
Yeah, you're just not going to find it
Plus,
here.
You will honestly never get me to talk about it like with a straight face anyway, because I can't do it. Like, camera's on, I'm not going to be able to talk about it.
You're cute.
I appreciate it.
So with things that, we won't necessarily talk about, we're not going to give you the whole smoke and mirrors act. We're just not going to do that. We are way too honest. Like, growing up, if I did something wrong, I would go apologize to my parents and ask for forgiveness before they even found out. That's always been my personality.
Yeah, and they're like, this is great.
Yeah. One child that does this, how can we make the rest of them do it? But I just, like, that's just not me. We're not going to pretend that everything's okay. And so we're going to be as real and respectful about topics as we possibly can. And I think that that's where growth happens. We're not going to create any kind of slander conversation or belittle things or create any kind of negative conversation around things that involve marriage. That's not our goal. It is to help equip other married couples and to succeed in the hardest earthly relationship that you have.
Yeah. And the thing that we've said a lot of times in the podcast, because it comes up so often, and I think it so often, is, we've been married for just shy of 9 years. We are not the longevity king and queen. People have been married much longer than us. People have been married much shorter than us. We are, somewhat experts in what we know. We're really showing, we just want to talk about things from our experience. So, you're not going to get the, novel about each thing, and I know everything about everything regarding interpersonal relationships, but we hope that we're coming from a real honest place, because that's really where we want to come from.
Yeah, so this how we want to be authentic to you, the person who shows up every week for us. And here we also want to share with you how we are going to be authentic with each other within our marriage that we feel like would be useful for you as a listener who is married. One way that we are authentic with each other, surprise, surprise,
communication. Bing, bing, the magic word.
Yes, it is huge, especially in marriage. You have to communicate. If you didn't want to talk to someone, maybe marriage wasn't the right thing, the right relationship.
Yeah.
But if you're in it, then you're in it. So you got to learn how to communicate. You got to learn how to do it better. And that's practice. And that means that you have to do it. You have to actually take the steps to stand in front of the other person and say, hey, it's me. Here's what I want to talk about. But you have to communicate. And we do that a lot. It has taken a lot of practice. We are not experts at it, but we actively practice it every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day, every hour of the day, we communicate with each other. We make it a priority.
Yeah. And there are going to be times when it's very conversational communication, and there are going to be times when it is heated conversation. What is it that Connell and Rhonda call theirs? Heated fellowship, I think it is. Yeah, and I love that.
Heated fellowship. Maybe let's get into some heated fellowship.
Yeah, it sounds so like, sweet, that's cool. But it's actually, that's kind of an argument. But it's a much better term. Yeah, and so even that, as long as you're respectful, you can have some passion. And I hope you do have some passion about what you believe in front of the person that you're closest with. So, yes. Don't be afraid to get a little bit, fiery and all that stuff, as long as you're being kind.
Respectful and grace and love and compassion. Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing is, don't leave out details. Again, there's a lot of complexities to life. There are so many places to get left behind if you're not sharing the good stuff. So if you're struggling with something, mental health or work or spiritual stuff, you have a person, built-in partnership, built-in conversation that can just lift up. And if your spouse has no idea what you're going through, then they can't help you.
That's true. A quick example, and we will definitely get into a deeper episode about this, but don't leave out details. I have a history with an eating disorder, just viewing myself differently than what my body actually is. And so very, very hard for me to come to Michael and tell him these things that I struggle with, but being honest about those details and letting him know, today I'm struggling. Today I'm really struggling, and here's the extent that I am struggling, and I need your help. Because built into marriage is an accountability partner, someone who cares so deeply for you and wants to see you succeed, that if you don't tell them what you're struggling with, they can't help you succeed, guys. You got to tell them the details. You have to tell them every little thing, because you think that they know, they already know this, I already shared this with them. Michael knows my extensive history with this thing that I struggle with, and he knows everything, but I still tell him every single thing when it pops up again, because he doesn't know that I'm struggling with specific things in that day or that week or that time. He has to know the details, so do not leave the details out. I just think that that's a really good example of it's hard for me sometimes to share those details And like I said, we absolutely plan to get into a deeper episode about that. But don't leave out the details, because the details are important. And the reason it's important to communicate and share the details is because it breaks the power of whatever it is that you may be struggling with. If you keep it bottled up, then it feels like this huge insurmountable thing that nobody understands and nobody can relate. And I'm the only one who deals with this. And I'm here to tell you that you're not the only one. And that's not to belittle your problems. It's to say that somebody else can help you. So communicating and sharing those details, there's power in that.
Yeah. I mean, so even if you're not married, we know we have a lot of people listening to the show who are not married and are hoping to, is just think about like a best friend relationship even. If you've ever had your friend share like an intimate detail of like, hey, I'm eating disorder, that's a great example. Or like, hey, my parents are fighting a lot. Like when people share hard stuff, it just builds a foundation of just care, and you can be a part of that if you're willing to kind of put yourself out there. And I understand a lot of people have been through some stuff, in their childhood or whatever, that makes that super difficult, which brings up also, we talk about therapy a lot. If you are in that place where you can't open up to anybody, especially if you find that you can't open up to your husband or wife, maybe a therapist can help you kind of unlock that stuff. There are tons of resources out there, so check that out.
Yes, we are huge, go to therapy people. Do it. It may take a little bit to find the right therapist for you, but they are such an advocate for you, for the person that's coming to them for help. And it's just, we've talked about it before. We've done therapy and we absolutely plan to do it again, because it is so important to do the work, do the hard work through all those things. It's you just do it. Just do the therapy. Don't wait till you have a problem. Do the therapy, please. Yeah. Because it's really, really good. It's good.
And so that brings up our challenge. In the next 7 days, talk with your spouse about the level of authenticity that you guys are currently having.
That's good.
Is there anything that you guys are not sharing with one another? If so, put it out there.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, it's not.
At all. But the fruit from that is just going to be incredible. And you can't have a thriving marriage if you don't do that on the regular.
Right. You can't. I would definitely say in conjunction with the challenges also, just remember to present it just dripping in grace and love. Because even though it's your issue, you don't want, I would never come to Michael and say, I am dealing with this and you just need to support me. Let me just tell you, he's going to shut down.
Bye.
He's going to say, shut it down.
Oh, that's back.
He's not going to hear me because it's very accusatory. It's not wrapped in love and grace at all. And so if I came to him humbly and I just confessed to him, I am really struggling with this today and I just need your support. I need for you to check in with me. I need your prayer.
I'll be like, I got you.
I got you.
I got you, boo.
I got you, boo. It's much better received. And also he can then react appropriately in a loving and graceful way. And so it's all about the delivery and just being vulnerable and authentic, just filled with grace and love.
Well said.
And that's our challenge. So do it. Do it the next 7 days. Do it. Do it.
Not 8.
Do it. That wraps up our episode today. We are so thankful that you continue to show up week after week and you let us know that you're listening. Please continue to do that. If you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about, connect with us. Links are in the show notes.
Our email, especially if you've got something personal that you don't want to broadcast anywhere in a comment thread, we have our Marriage Talks podcast at gmail.com. Hit us up.
Yeah, and of course, if you ask a question or ask us to talk about a topic, we will absolutely never reveal who said what, because we know that these can be very sensitive issues. Please reach out to us if you haven't rated or reviewed us on Apple Podcasts. That would be wonderful. We would love that. And above all else, if you like today's episode, please consider sharing it with a friend. That would be amazing. Thank you guys so much for listening.
See ya.
You the best.